Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Macro Podcast. Joining me today is my good friend Satch Bernhardt. Satch, how are you doing today?
Good, and you, Doug?
I
Happy to
am
be
well.
here.
Yeah, welcome. Satch is a very interesting individual, has had a chance to have several careers, and we're going to delve into both of them and unpack it a little bit because Satch is so interesting. Satch, just if you could, let us know, how did you get involved in aviation?
Yeah, so that started when I was just a little kid, man. I wanted to fly. I think everybody that is in aviation wanted to be in aviation since they were little kids, right?
Yeah.
And when I finished high school, I didn't even go to college. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I just went straight to flight school, and I started getting my hours, getting my licenses, and I became an instructor. And I did that for 3 years. I started flying when I was 18.
Yeah.
So by the time I was 21, I already had all my hours, the 1500 to go to the airlines, and that's what got me there.
Now, did
Um,
you do like an accelerated program for any of the licenses, or was it all just a la carte and when you could?
yeah. Well, I don't know what you mean by, because I know
Well,
there's some very accelerated
yeah,
programs like the ATP, right? That is
like
like,
crazy expensive though. So
right.
it's like, man, unless you're like independently wealthy, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I went to it was expensive. I think the overall cost was and this is back in 2010,
Yeah,
and the overall cost was 80 something thousand dollars for the entire thing, and it
yeah,
was a full program, start to finish from like zero to MEI.
yeah.
So but it took me about I didn't get all the licenses up to like CFII and MEI until
Mm,
later on. So like
yeah,
I did everything up to CFI, and then as I was teaching, then I started getting CFII and then
yeah,
MEI.
yeah. Seems like if you're not going to do an accelerated program, your way is probably the most feasible, right? Because the sooner you can get to the CFI and actually get paid to fly, that's like the soonest route, it seems.
Yeah, that was it's definitely better. And then I worked out a deal with the fly school where I didn't pay for my double I neither day MEI. I just signed a contract and said, hey, I'm committing to teaching for the next year. I knew I was gonna have to
Yeah.
anyways because I was 19, right? I was like, there's
Yeah,
nowhere else
well,
I can
I'm not
go.
going anywhere. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that
And
was
was
how.
this all Florida where you learned how to fly?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, the flight school used to be Comair Academy back in
Oh
the
yeah,
day.
yeah. I remember that.
So
Yeah.
it switched. It got bought out by Delta. At one point, it was Delta Connection Academy. When I started, it was Delta Connection Academy, and then it got bought out by Aerosim Flight Academy, and then
Mm,
now it's owned by L3 Harris.
okay, that's
Yeah,
interesting. Private equity play. That's fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um.
And
And so you got done instructing, and then what was your transition like to? Did I assume you went to the regionals at that point?
yeah, I went to the regionals, dude. It was funny because when I turned 21, right? And never did it cross my mind that there was an age limitation to be an airline pilot.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my 1500 hours. That's all I was shooting for. And here I am applying at the airlines. I was like, hey, I got my 1500 hours. When can I start? And they were all saying like,
Bro.
hey, you're not even old enough. You're
Yeah.
21. You need to be 23. And I was like, what? Is that even a rule? And it's almost as if the FAA overheard that, and
There's like,
literally
nah,
months they changed, and they made that exemption where you can be 21, you can be under 23, but you just can't be a captain, right? So
that's
they
right.
give you a restricted ATP. And so there was one airline that knew about that exemption, and they scooped me right up,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
we can bring you in. So I started when I was 21 there. They gave me my restricted ATP. I flew for Express Jet.
And was
Um,
this a CRJ at this point or
ERJ, the Embraer
the Embraer?
145.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so I flew for them for about 7 years. I started with them when I was in 2013.
Mm.
So 2013 to 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, in 2020, they shut down in the middle of the
Oh
pandemic.
wow.
Yeah. And I'm always telling pilots, man, get your affairs in order, invest in real estate or whatever you like, but have a backup plan because
Yeah.
aviation is awesome. And just prior to the podcast, I
Yeah.
was talking to this other aviation guy that is in investments in real estate, and he alluded to the same thing. Aviation is pretty cool, and it's really awesome. We get to fly those planes, but uh, the company is going to make the decision that is best for the company at any given time. So you can be one of those people that are cut out if you're at the bottom of the list, right? So you never know when that's going to happen. So it's always better to have a backup plan just in case. And don't get fooled by thinking, oh, we're the biggest airline, because that's what we thought. In the regional level, we used to think as ExpressJet, dude, we had been around since the 1970s. We're big,
We're
we're
golden.
the best quality airline. That doesn't mean anything. When they're trying to cut people out, you're
Done.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems like you're kind of subject to some whim, and it's like you never know when that's going to bite you, and not a pleasant thing.
Right. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
and it seems like the seniority thing can be a real problem too. If you're like flying for someone for a long time, and then for whatever reason you can't work there anymore, trying to go somewhere else, you literally have to start at the bottom again, seniority wise.
Yeah, that's a real bummer too, because the pay is so drastic. You start off, I think most majors right now, you're starting off first year is like $100,000, and top of the scale as a captain, you're making somewhere north of 300 to $350,000. And that's a huge gap. I mean, imagine the lifestyle difference to go from a $350,000 guy to going back down to $100,000, right? If you were not set up to like sustain that big of change with your investments or your cash flow or your lifestyle, whatever you were doing, that's going to be a shocking moment when you have to change everything.
And it dawns on me, Satch, and I think you might agree with this. Okay, next time out, we're going to hand out the private pilot license handbook, the instrument rating handbook, commercial handbook, ATP handbook, and Rich Dad Poor Dad in the next kit we put together.
Yeah.
And in the Jepson bag, we'll have those books, and in addition to the headset, Rich Dad Poor Dad in with the collection.
Yeah, you need it, man. It's funny you mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad, because that was the first book that got me into all this. I never. This is how I even got started, man. I was so bad with saving money that I bought that book one day out of the airport. I was just walking around the airport, right? And I was looking at books, and I saw it, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I had heard people talk about it, right?
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I should probably read this book and see what this is all about. Maybe it will help me save some money and make some money for me. And dude, that book just blew my mind. It just mind changing, and it literally took my life in a totally different path.
Yeah, it's really true, and I experienced the same effect with the book. I'd heard about real estate, and had family friend investing in high school. When I was in high school, I worked on the investment, so I had an idea of the idea of having rentals and whatnot. But Rich Dad Poor Dad, the amazing thing about it is it will expand your mind in a way that once you like really appreciate the lesson, I don't think you'll ever be the same. It's one of those few books that like literally almost, and again, I don't mean to be sacrilegious, but almost a religious experience where like, oh my God, my life has changed. Right. And really you'll never think the same way again, I think. And that's what's great about the book.
Yeah, I totally agree. I definitely think you should be part of the Jeffersons.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan, doesn't it? Now, speaking of other risks to aviation professionals, talk about the medical risk, because there are some things that could go wrong where you lose your ticket, and that seems like another huge risk that you have to protect from.
Yeah, dude, that's a great point. I have a good friend of mine. He lives here in Orlando as well, and he had been flying for United for a couple of years on the 767, doing those the Europe routes, and based out of Newark. He loved it. That was everything for him. And I'll tell you something. He owns a lot of real estate.
That's good.
He owns a lot of real estate, and we've always talked about, right? Because we had like those two commonalities, right? We'll be talking about flying, and then we'll talk about real estate stuff. And one day he just tells me, "Hey, man, I lost my medical. I couldn't renew it. I have this problem that developed in my eye, and I'm legally blind on that eye.
Oh, so, man,
I can't go back to flying. I'm done." And it sucks, dude. Like, he was very, very passionate about aviation and everything. But so we started talking about finances, and then he's like, I was curious to know, like, are you gonna be okay with the loss? Obviously, you get the long-term disability stuff from the airlines,
Hmm.
but he was like, dude, I got the real estate, man. That pays for me way more than anything else, you know. Like, I don't. It doesn't. The money wise, it doesn't affect me. I'm just bummed that I'm not flying anymore. But
Isn't that interesting? And imagine the alternative, like if you don't change your ways and build a real estate passive or active portfolio, um, it's a huge change in opportunities that's really shocking. And I don't know about you, but it seems like the best thing to do is protect yourself and build a financial fortress that can withstand a hit like that.
yeah, 100%. And many pals can relate to this. I've had moments when I was flying along and so, dude, you think the craziest stuff when you're flying, because sometimes you got those long flights
Yeah,
for an
long
hour,
flight.
nobody's talking,
Yeah,
you're just sitting there looking out the window, and you're like really just thinking through everything, right? And then it's like, before I started doing real estate, I remember sitting there thinking, dude, if I lose my medical or somehow I quit flying, like there's nothing else I know how to do.
yeah.
Like this is the only thing I know how to do, and I'm done. You know, if there's nothing else besides this, I'm done. And it just really hit me, you know. And then I started having that conversation with a couple of other guys that I was flying with, and they will tell me the same thing. They're like, dude, this is the only thing I know how to do.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah, it seems like sales and real estate are the two very best things to learn as a safety net, and that's basically my thesis for folks that, if I were, I'm so hardcore into the real estate side now that it wouldn't make sense for me. But there's they talk about alternative universes, and I'm not sure what I think about this, but anyway, there's an alternative universe out there where I'm maybe a 777 FO or something like that, but I would tell my younger self or younger other pilots or first officers, like, guys, make sure you know how to sell and make sure you understand finance, and especially have a real estate portfolio and protect yourself. And such a different outcome. And again, it's crazy the difference it makes over time too. And it's like, okay, on one hand, let's make it hypothetical. First officer 737 first officer never invests and never has a portfolio, even if they're making great salary, but they spend it all. Versus and think about the net worth difference of a 20-year career of investing in real estate the whole time, levered up. And again, that's the thing that's beautiful about real estate, and maybe the number one things that I think is that you have the bank as your partner. And
yeah.
your partner's got a lot of cash that they're going to invest with you. And by the way, the tenant's going to help you pay down the note at the meantime. So it's an incredible difference over a 20-year period.
Yeah, dude, and if you do the math, I know we talk a lot about, just you and I, about real estate syndications. One day I did the math. If you do the math on like most return profiles and real estate syndications, the aim is to double the investor's money within 3 to 5 years, right? But
That's right.
I think the worst case scenario, 5 years. If you do the math from $50,000, I have to look, but I think it ends up being at the end of 25 years. So that's doubling your money 5 times.
Yep.
I think it's just north of $2 million, right?
Right.
So
That's right.
if you think about that, on your career, if you do a 25, 30 year career, if you obviously you probably won't be able to invest multiples of $50,000 in 1 year in the same year, but as you progress, if you make it a goal to invest every year just $50,000 at the end of say 30 years, imagine how much that's going to be, right? Even
It
if you
adds up, doesn't it?
$50,000 for 10 years in a row, that's 10 different syndications that you can have, like 10 different lanes going down, accumulating wealth for you, right? And each one of those will turn into $2 million each. That's $20 million that you can have potentially by the end of 30 years, right?
And the beautiful thing about that is, like you, Satch, there are some really excellent general partners that can handle almost all of the day to day. So even when you're out, let's say you're traveling, you're out and off, you're out, I guess what the average is, half the month you're literally away from home, and then you come home, and again, it sounds nice in theory that you're back home and hey, you're home, you have all that free time. Well, guess what? The things you weren't doing when you were gone are waiting for you when you get back. I'm going to speculate if you have a family and a wife, there's a honeydew list like that. So you got a checklist of things you got to knock out when
Yeah.
you get back. So even if you want to just be passive, there's still some great opportunities there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the best fit. I invest in deals as an LP, as a passive investor, because I truly love the concept. Many people think that being active on a syndication is where the action is, but there's really not much cash flow for us on the GP side until the deal sells and we hit those projected returns, because passive investors are paid first. And I always tell folks, like, hey, unless you're like, I want to explain both sides of the equation so they know what they're up against. Because some people think, oh, I want to be active in deals, I want to get more, and it's like, well, just make sure you know what you're up to. Which is another thing that I like as well, is that as a GP you don't get paid until the end, and until after passive investors are paid, because it really makes the whole project be aligned with the investors' interests first. It's not like it's not like we can just not return money to investors and still we're gonna make a killing on the deal. That's not gonna happen, right?
Yeah, you have to compensate the partner heavily to get the capital to do it, and for sure, deservedly so. They get the lion's share of the profit first, in recovery of capital, and then recovery on capital. And so rightfully so, the GP takes last, and again, assuming all things went well, does well, and sometimes handsomely, but not always the case. And I think you're right. It is a safer bet in a lot of ways to be an LP also. So I have to agree with that.
Yeah, love it.
And what are the pros of being a GP, in case they're interested in, like, okay, yeah, what's great about being a GP?
Yeah, and I always bring to pilots that want to be, we're always welcome, right? Like, hey man, if you want to be a GP, more welcome to have you on board, and you can take some of these duties. Depends on what you think you're a good fit for and what you can do. So just to say, as an example, right? If you had plenty of connections and you say, hey man, I think I can probably bring $1 million to a deal. Is that something that I can do to add value, right? Absolutely, it is. You do have to partake in other roles in the syndication per the SEC. You can't just raise capital and then get compensated for it, right? So we'll probably, if that's what you want to do, we'll bring you along on our due diligence process on the asset management calls every week with that particular asset, right? So and then as a result of doing that, bringing that capital to the table and taking on those roles, you can get equity in the deal. So if somebody were interested in doing that, that's how you can get in a deal and get some equity in the GP side. You can virtually bring $0 to the table of your own money, just bring other people's money to the table and participate more on the active side of the deal, and boom, you got some equity, right? So the way it will look like, you probably won't get paid anything until the deal sells, right? But it will be in relation to whatever equity you were awarded for doing this.
And also, you learn a tremendous amount along the way, and maybe that's maybe the underrated side of it, is how much would you learn. Again, sometimes it's kind of a mindset thing, like, I don't get paid any money. Well, like, dude, what is that old saying? I teach you how to fish, and you'll never eat it, never worry about eating again. You got to know how to fish now. So it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. In the first couple of years when I started doing it, I started bringing capital for the same operators that I was investing as an LP, right? So I was a passive investor, and I started forming those relationships with them. And I said, hey, listen, I want to start getting more involved. I'll be willing to bring friends and people that I know to these deals with you guys. I like you guys. I like how you guys have been communicating with me and what you guys are doing. So I think all of the people that I know will be very happy with this as well. Don't give me anything. I don't want any part of the equity or anything. I'll just make the introduction to you guys, but just keep me along for the process, right? Let me learn more about this process. And that's how I started developing these relationships and getting more known with other investors, right? Because now those guys were happy with the results they were getting, and they started referring other people to me, and it just snowballed from there.
And Satch, so where along in the journey did you like, okay, so did you start with some single family homes and flips while you were trying like where along the way did you really get into real estate? So I'm not sure I understood. Did you really go full into real estate before the airline gig was over, or how did you get that transition going?
Yeah, no, I was I guess you can say it was full time. Just I had no days off, dude.
Yeah.
I went through like 2 years of 0 days off. I will be flying, and when I was flying, I was doing like I will be doing real estate in between flights. I
Right.
will be running around the airport looking for Wi-Fi to get on the computer, make calls, like send
Yeah.
contracts. And I was just a one-man show at that time, right?
Yeah.
I was putting deals together. I was doing single family home flips, and so that's what I started doing. And dude, like on I'm gonna say this, it's not advice for people, right? But
Right.
so some of the things that I was doing first to get some deals, you ever seen those signs that say we buy houses on the
Yep.
side of the road?
Yep.
In some counties it's illegal to put that, right? It's all
Yeah.
depending on your code enforcement regulations. But in mine was illegal to put it, but I did not care what I had to do to get people to get my
Yes.
phone ringing, right? So I would go on Friday nights at midnight with like 100
Yes.
signs, and I will be putting them out on the city, and I will be down at like 5 a.m. in the morning, you
Yeah.
know, and then I had to stay up and I had to be waiting on the phone so that people will call me because and then they will be calling me interested in selling their house, right? So I had
Yep.
to be ready to answer the phone. And so I'll be doing this throughout the weekend, and then I'll go flying, and then dude, it was just chaotic, right? To get this thing off the ground.
Yeah.
But so that was my start into it. And then things started getting momentum to the point that I was getting more cash flow, and I was starting hiring team members, and I started growing up the team. That company now has 31 employees,
Oh wow.
and I fully detached myself.
Yeah.
I'm not actively involved
Yeah.
in the company anymore. So it's beautiful. You know, that was like my objective.
Yeah.
And obviously I made it sound easier than it was.
Oh
I
no,
could
and
tell.
I think we need to share the realities of flipping with the folks that are playing along at home. Flipping is a job and an intense one at that at times. I don't know if again I've never personally done it, but I've been closer around and seeing the we'll call it the joys of subcontractors at that level can be quite wild.
Yep. Yeah. Chasing contractors around is not fun. They will always mess up some of the work. You have to call them back, redo it. They don't want to do it. They think that's the best they can do, and you're like, dude, that looks like crap. So
Mm.
it's just a mess, you know. But and then you have to sustain some months back when the interest rates were taking a hike a few months ago. Um, for 2 months in a row, no, October we lost $45,000.
Oh yeah.
Like we were up negative $45,000. We have so many properties on the market ready to sell, but because it was just at the right time that the interest rates were going up,
Mm-hmm.
people started backing out deals. They weren't buying them, you know. So as a company, we lost $45,000. In November, we lost $35,000. So many people are not like those are some of the things you have to be willing to take the pressure on, right? And like my employees don't care that we're losing $45,000. Their paycheck is due when the paycheck is due, right? So I
Yeah.
have to be willing. I have to be ready to uh, fulfill that commitment to them, and that's one of the things that you undertake as a business owner.
Absolutely, and such a hats off and kudos for building out an organization like that. That's not a very common size actually. I think for a flip operation, that's a pretty good size outfit. So massive kudos for scaling that. That's an incredible accomplishment.
Thank you.
And so when did you really start to notice the LP side for multifamily, and how did you get involved in multifamily syndication?
Yeah, so through doing the single family home flips, I was starting accumulating cash, and I knew I didn't want to buy single family homes. And trust me, I had the opportunity to buy many because through our pipeline that we
Yeah.
get single family homes, there's hundreds I could have bought and hold as single family home rental. But coincidentally, a lot of those homes that we buy are from landlords that they just wanted to give it a shot at being a landlord as with a single family home, and they get fed up with it, you know. And so I started like putting together all these stories from them as to why they were selling, and a lot of smart guys, with like different professions, and they were just like, hey man, I don't have time for this, too much work, this and the other. And dude, and if you do the math, man, the cash flow is when doing that. If you really do the math, most people get $200-300 in cash flow from a single family home, right?
Yeah.
And dude, if the AC goes out that year, that just wipes out your entire cash flow and more, right?
Yeah.
Because think about it, right? You made $300 a month. That's $3,000, like $3,600 a year. Your AC costs $5,000,
5 or 7 or something like that easily. Yeah.
So that just wiped out your cash flow for the next year and a half, 2 years. Now if the roof goes out, dude, come on, like you're done, right? So like the only benefit to me on the single family home space is the appreciation. That's where the real value is, right?
Yeah.
Not the cash flow. You're not gonna, in my opinion, you're not gonna live off of the cash flow because all these things will keep on reoccurring. So that's why I was not enticed to the single family home space, and I started looking for something that was better and landed on multifamily. Right, I always felt attracted to multifamily. I wasn't sure how. I didn't even know you can invest in a syndication. Right, I thought it was just a one-man show that was the owner of a big,
either that or big REIT or somebody's got all kinds of cash. They're plunking down 100% cash, and they're absolutely. Yeah.
Never did it cross my mind that you could even do that. So I just started attending conferences about multifamily, and I started putting the pieces together, and I was like, wow, I can invest my money in these deals and not have to go through like the single family home circus over there. And that's what I started doing as an LP. You know, I'm just investing my money. And I like the model a lot, and I just fell in love with it, and that's when I started making that transition to actually being involved in deals.
And what do you think are the top benefits of a syndication versus a single family home model?
Oh, dude, there's so many. I'll tell you just three that I like the most, right? So one of them is being just completely passive, right? There's nothing you have to do other than just doing your due diligence on the operator. Make sure that is a guy that you like, you trust. They've proven the track record, and that's your first thing, right? Obviously, looking at the deal as well that they're putting together. Make sure you like the deal, but that's as far as it goes on your actively involvement in the deal. If you want to be a passive investor, right? Once you invest your money, you're done. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. You start receiving cash flow from the deal. Another thing is the liability on the deal. As a passive investor, you're protected. There's no if something were to go wrong on the property, you're not liable for the loan. You're not liable for getting sued. If you're doing it on your own, you're liable for anything that may go wrong on the property. Right? You're liable for the loan. You're liable if the tenant sues you or something like that. So the protection there is a big deal. Obviously, risk of money is always a possibility on whether you're doing it on your own or on a syndication, right? So at least in a syndication, that's your only exposure, the capital you invest in. And the third thing is diversification as far as location goes. You can when you're a one-man show investing in single family homes, you may be limited to your backyard, right? And if you live in California, dude, I don't even know how you can make sense of buying properties and do rentals there, right? So a lot of folks that are in states where their market is not suitable for investing, they can leverage syndications and operators that are in other places around the country. And dude, we have investors that invest with us, and they never even go to the properties. They never even seen them. They live in California and they invest in Texas. So that ability to like leverage that diversification in location is awesome.
Pretty incredible. And it seems like too the big one that I think is interesting to me too is the day-to-day operation of a property is just not my cup of tea personally, and the ability to bring in a third-party management company that really is good at that lane is really attractive as well. And I think that's one of the underrated reasons that and again, there's a good debate about whether you should or shouldn't if you're a GP. But especially if you're early in the game in terms of multifamily, or just generally you want to specialize on just the capital and the deal flow, having a third party management company in there is a really nice opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, and there's some really good property management companies. They specialize in doing value add apartment complexes, and they're part of your team. They know
Yeah.
how to handle things. Usually we get on asset management calls every week with each property and talk to the property management company, and it's just like any other business. We keep track of their KPIs and see, okay, how many leases, how many people have been showing up to the listening center, how many of those have converted to actual leases, how many sign-ins do we have, how many new leases have we done in the last month or the last week. So it's really a good partnership, and just keep each other accountable every week.
And Satch, you recently branded to V1 Capital. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on now currently in your business?
Yeah, so I had previously it was Bernhardt Capital, and I just did that because I could not find a name, so I just put my last name on there. But I've always felt, and I don't know what you think, Doug, but I always felt that having your name attached to something makes when you're trying to grow and hire employees, they may not feel as attached to the brand when it's a last name. When it's like, all right, is this dude's last name? But when you make it something external to nobody, right? It's just something else out there. Like people start feeling that connection to that something, right?
Yeah.
And
I think that makes a lot of sense to me also.
Yeah, and they will like probably wear like your logo shirt, your backpack. They will carry around. They will talk about it, right? But when it's your last name, especially as last name as complicated as mine, like something, it's hard to even say it. So I just think that makes it a lot more enjoyable for people. And I wanted to create something also that was a little bit relatable to pilots, right? So V1 Capital, everybody knows what V1s are. When you're first learning about V1s, they're your nightmare because a lot of people don't get them right away. So I love V1 cuts, and I love the brand. And so
And for the folks that don't fly, V1 is just a situation where the plane is ready to actually get off the ground, got enough momentum going, and it's time to hop in the air. And a lot of fun is about to happen once you hit that number.
Yeah. And so that V1, if you go, what we call it, right, V1, and if you go past V1 and you lose an engine, you're still taking off. You're not stopping. That V1 is more of a length number, right? So it determines based on your current weight and the performance. If you were to try to stop past V1, you're not going to stop with the remaining runway.
That's right. It's like, okay, your choice here is you got to go and you got to come back or do something else, but you can't stay here.
Right.
or let's put it this way: if you stay there past that, the runway is going to be gone, and some probably like fences and other stuff is going to get in the way, and that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah, not a good idea.
Usually a bad day if you stay on the ground past.
Yeah, what's tough, the way we practice them, Doug, is we're in a simulator, and they usually, when a V1 cut is coming, they don't tell you, but it's coming because they turn the weather super, super low. You can hardly even see just about a couple feet in front of you the wrong way. So as soon as they do that, you're like, all right, here we go.
All right, here we go. They're gonna cut me on this. I know it. Yeah.
And that is tough, man, because you can hardly see the runway, and obviously, if you go past V1 now, you got to take off. You can't stop, so you got to like transition from like seeing just a couple feet in front of you to like just looking at your instruments, making sure that you're not like
straight and level, and ideally climbing at a decent rate.
Right. Yeah. So pretty interesting maneuver. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's fascinating too, Satch. And a lot of people may not understand that. A lot of probably the thing that I admire most about professional pilots is the degree at which they constantly practice emergency procedures in the simulator. So they got muscle memory. And again, I think the most famous case that most people remember is the Chelsea Sullenberger losing engines at a low altitude. And okay, their option, okay, let's land on a river. Why not? And having the muscle memory and the instinct more than I don't know that you can do it consciously. I think that's what's really fascinating about it is that you get such subconscious level. You have an instinct at that point of how to handle the problem much more than really, oh, we're just going to think this through, and we're going to take about a good 30 minutes in committee time. We're going to form a committee. I'll tell you what, why don't you go back, let's get some folks from the first class. There's some pretty sharp people back there in first class, I think. We'll talk about it, and then we'll figure out where we're going to land. And no, you don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You don't have time. Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah, we had one time we had a cabin depressurization, like in real life, and dude, it was almost the captain and I we knew exactly the steps to follow. You practice that a lot, so there was no hesitation. We were not rushing, but there was no like discussion on like what do you fucking think that we should hear, right? It was like we know the steps, let's get to it.
Well, ultimately, too, this is the real answer to everything, too. I think this is a lesson you can apply to life generally. Fight, flight, or freeze, right? You fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the instinctual human nature. Like if you're, when we get closer to an animal nature, it's fight, flight, or freeze. And so the worst, again, absolute worst thing you could do is freeze, right? So I think that's another thing that's so great about the repetition is like you just don't freeze because okay, I have a next step to do, next step. And so again, it's really one of the things I admire most about the profession.
Yeah. It's awesome, and it's awesome when you see that synergy happening, right?
Yeah. Well, that's another thing too. The cockpit resource management. Of course, one of my weird fetishes is okay. I'm not gonna. Okay, this is a PG show. This is a family show. Air disaster shows are really fascinating to watch and learn from, and that you see. I think another famous one that just a perfectly good airplane flew into the ground out in the Everglades because they became fixated on a little bulb that was burnt out. And they were trying to figure out gear up, gear down. I don't know. And so instead of flying the plane, everybody was hyper focused inside the cockpit, and nobody was. Oh, by the way, there's the ground. And so that's another thing about crew resource management that evolved. And again, other lessons that you could probably take into into the world is, well, how are we using resource management and communication? And I think that's another interesting thing that could be probably deployed from aviation that would be fascinating.
Yeah, you bring a good point, and we apply a lot of the stuff that we do at the airlines in our business. So checklist, procedures, a manual that explains how to do every step. That's something that is ingrained in the airlines, and so we implement that in our business. My goal is that if I replace a team member with someone else, they should be able to take on that seat, look through the task that person does, and be able to execute 80 to 90% on their own without any outside instruction.
That's incredible. And it does put the onus on the trainers and the system designer, but at the end of the day, how much better off are you when you really are redundant at that point, and you can protect yourself from being over reliant on one person. And I think that from a system standpoint, that makes a heck of a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I think that's like the natural transition, right? You become from a person working in the business to working on the business, and the way working on the business looks like is like you become the designer, right? Like I look at the systems and processes, and I design. I see maybe a hump on the way, and I'm like, okay, there's something we need to fix here. And then we can dive into that position and see what's going on, right? Like maybe there's some miscommunication between two different departments. And so that's where we go in and design a better process for that to be smoother.
That's really incredible. And I literally am going to take this moment from this podcast and implement it as well. Thank you, Satch, for teaching us something incredible. I really admire that, and it's fun to watch. And I guess we should, Satch, talk about what are you working on now that you're excited about? Any deals on the horizon that you can talk about that you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a very, very exciting deal. Is in Houston, Texas. My two target states are Florida and Texas. I love those two states. I live in Florida, and if I were to move, it will be Texas. Uh, the This deal is in Herman Park, which is in the medical center. Most people are familiar with that area. I mean, very there's the salary and allocation is very high. So a lot of people can afford the rents in this location. This property we're taking over, which is crucial right now in these times, in this current market situation, right? So we are it's high interest rates. What we're doing is we're taking over the existing financing from the seller, which is a 2.5 interest rate.
Nice.
It still has 28 years left on it.
Wow.
So getting creative in these times and making deals work and create a win-win situation is really the way to go. And that's what we're doing on this property. It's a Class A, built in 2004, great location. We're only doing very low leverage. We're doing a 61% loan to value. So we're trying to be very conservative. The deal cash flows from day one. Lifetime cash flow on the deal is around 6%, which is pretty healthy. And considering the super low loan to value that we have on the deal, right? Like normally, if you has that much of a the equity multiple that we're getting is what's surprising given the low LTV.
Right.
Because usually with that much equity in the deal, the returns are drastically low, right? Obviously the cash flow is high because you don't have much debt, but we are overall multiple is going to be closer to 1.8 to 2x on a 3 to 5 year span. So I love it. Pretty typical return profile. Something interesting that we did in this deal is we divided the investment profiles into 3 different asset classes. So you have Class A, Class B, and Class C.
Okay.
It's too long to explain, but obviously if anybody's interested in knowing more about those different return profiles, just reach out to me and I will be more than happy to show you the slide deck. But in essence, Class A will be for folks that don't care about the appreciation or the profit upon the sale, and they just want a strictly steady cash flow hitting their bank account every single month, right? Then Class B is more like the standard. You're getting cash flow and you get appreciation on the deal, profit once we sell the property. And Class C is same version as a Class B investment share, except there's is restricted for folks that can invest $250,000 or more into the deal. They get favorable economics, right? So their splits are a lot better.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of classic classes for folks to invest in, which is awesome because everybody has a different approach to what they want, right? So
absolutely,
it really lends to that. And yeah, so beautiful properties. And being a 2004, what I love about newer properties, Doug, and you might agree with me, is that the newer the properties, the less the capex there is, right? There's the less deferred maintenance. We're not going to have pipes bursting out. We're not going to have all these structural issues with the property or mechanical issues. It's like a very vanilla cookie cutter. We're just renovating the interior of the units. They were from 2004, so we're just making them 2023 standards, right? And that's about it. There's plenty of gap in the rents between what they should be and where we are, that there's a lot of potential there.
That's incredible, Satch. And how should they reach you if they want to talk about this deal or just get to know you a little bit? How should they reach out?
Yeah, the best way, I'm super active on LinkedIn. Just type in my name, Satch Bernhardt. There's not many people with my name on it, so it should be very easy to find me.
Yeah, and I will include that in the notes of the show, also on YouTube here, also. And Satch, is there anything else or any question I should have asked that I didn't?
I don't think so, Doug. I think you covered everything. I love it. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
It was a pure joy for me, Satch. I really enjoyed talking about aviation, honestly, and getting to know about your journey and so much. And I really appreciate the time to share with the folks what your experience has been like and what you're looking forward to moving forward.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you. And always happy to help. It's funny enough, this week I've gotten on 2 calls with folks that were starting in aviation and they also like real estate.
Yeah.
They were young guys, they were like 28, 18, 19, 20-year-old guys that wanted to know my experience to see if I can give them some feedback or some guidance. So I'm always open to helping folks.
That's awesome, Satch, and thank you so much for the time, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, Doc.
All right, bye bye.